$19 billion. That is the number Canada is committing to a new fleet of fighter jets. But there is a hard reality that very few people in Ottawa are willing to admit out loud. For that kind of money, we might never actually own these aircraft. This week, the NDP officially called on the government to cancel the contract for 88 F-35 fighters. On the surface, this looks like standard political theater. It is easy to dismiss it as partisan posturing before an election cycle. But if you look past the headlines and read the defense policy documents, you will see a different story. A story that is much more concerning than a simple budget debate. The problem isn't about how fast the jet flies or how well it evades radar. The problem isn't even about the firepower it carries or its stealth capabilities. The core issue is about who actually holds the keys to turn it on. In geopolitics, trust is a form of currency. And when Washington threatens tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, they aren't just attacking our economy. They are devaluing that currency. We have seen Donald Trump use trade as a blunt weapon against his closest allies. We have seen partners forced to pick sides or face severe economic consequences. So the question we need to ask is simple. Why is Canada handing over its entire air defense system to a partner that has just proven they are willing to squeeze us? This isn't about engine specs or dogfighting capabilities. This is about a $19 billion sovereignty trap that Canada is walking into with its eyes wide open. Most people still think of the F-35 as just a modern fighter jet. But in this era, that understanding is dangerously outdated. The F-35 is essentially a flying supercomputer wrapped in stealth coding. It runs on more than 8 million lines of complex code. And here is a detail that matters most. Every single one of those lines is controlled by the United States Department of Defense. For an F-35 to actually fight, it needs something called mission data files. Think of these files like the operating system on your smartphone. But instead of contacts or photos, this system holds a massive library of every radar signal, every missile frequency, and every threat signature on the planet. It acts as a digital translator for the pilot. It tells the jet what is a friend, what is a foe, and what is just background noise. Without these files being constantly updated, the F-35 can still fly. It can still perform beautifully at air shows, but operationally, it would be flying blind against modern threats. When a jet encounters a new radar signal that isn't in its library, it registers it as an unknown. In modern aerial warfare, an unknown is a death sentence. It means the jet cannot jam the signal, cannot target the source, and cannot defend itself effectively. It wouldn't be able to identify new Russian air defense systems like the S-400 or incoming hypersonic missiles. It becomes a very expensive target instead of a hunter. And according to defense analysts, these critical data files are not programmed in Ottawa. They are not managed by the Royal Canadian Air Force. They are managed by a specialized team at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. The security protocols there are extremely strict. According to the U.S. 350,000 Spectrum Warfare Group, the core security functions are restricted to U.S. citizens only. That means Canada's top engineers, no matter how cleared they are not allowed to touch the core system. We do not have root access to the brain of the very machine we are buying. Think of it as the most expensive subscription service on the planet. You pay $19 billion, but you never actually own the car. You are just buying the right to drive it for a while. And the administrator in Florida can revoke that right whenever they want. They can delay a critical software update during a diplomatic crisis. They can refuse to integrate a new weapons system that Canada needs specifically for Arctic defense. If Canada's political credit card gets declined in Washington because of a trade dispute, this fleet effectively becomes a brick. That isn't national assets management. That is a dependency that creates a single point of failure for our entire national security. Now, you might think this is just the standard deal for everyone who buys the F-35. You might think this is the price of admission for top-tier technology. But that isn't true. There is one country in the world that the U.S. allows to operate its own software system. That country is Israel. The Israeli F-35I Adir variant is integrated with their own electronic warfare systems. They can update threats themselves without sending data back to the U.S. for approval. They refused to sign the contract unless they were granted this specific independence. They have complete operational sovereignty. So the uncomfortable question is, why them and not us? We are a founding member of NATO. We are a strategic partner in NORAD. We share the longest undefended border in the world. But this difference in treatment signals Canada's true standing in the eyes of the Pentagon. They trust Israel enough to hand over the source code, but for Canada, Germany, or the UK, they only hand over the Valet Key. European security experts have been warning about this risk for years. If the U.S. decides to restrict F-35 operations for political leverage, the entire fleet is grounded. When you look at the exception made for Israel and the handcuffs put on everyone else, the picture becomes clear. This was never about technical feasibility. This has always been about control and leverage. And under an administration that puts America first above alliances, that control is a risk we cannot afford to ignore. So if the F-35 carries this much baggage, does Canada have any other option? This is where the Swedish Saab Gripen usually enters the conversation. But the real reason to look at the Gripen isn't because it's cheaper or faster. The reason comes down to two words that every sovereign nation should care about: technology transfer. Saab has committed to providing full source code access to its customers. They allow Canada to have full control over mission data and electronic warfare libraries. That means if a new threat appears in the Arctic tomorrow, Canadian engineers can code a countermeasure immediately. We wouldn't need to draft a formal request to Washington. We wouldn't need to wait for approval from a base in Florida. We could adapt at the speed of the threat, not the speed of American bureaucracy. Furthermore, the Gripen is designed for a dispersed operations doctrine, which fits Canada's geography perfectly. Most modern fighters, including the F-35, require pristine runways and complex ground support equipment. They need climate-controlled hangars to maintain their stealth coatings. The Gripen was built for a different reality. It can take off and land on snowy highways in the middle of a harsh winter. It can be serviced by a small team of conscripts in a forest clearing using tools carried in a single truck. For a country like Canada, with vast Arctic territories and very few fully equipped air bases in the north, this is a strategic game changer. In a world that is becoming less predictable, the best jet isn't the one with the highest specs on paper. The best jet is the one you can actually fly when you need to, from wherever you need to. The Gripen might not have the fame or the marketing budget of the F-35, but at least you hold the keys in your own hand. You are the owner, not a long-term renter. Sweden and Brazil chose this path because they understand the value of operational independence. You never want your national security to depend 100% on the goodwill of a foreign leader. It doesn't matter who that leader is or how friendly they were in the past. Many people assume this deal is done and cannot be changed. But the reality is that Canada's first F-35 isn't scheduled for delivery until 2026. We still have a window, however small, to rethink this historic decision. Look at the broader geopolitical context to see why this is urgent. Donald Trump threatened 25% tariffs on Canadian goods the moment he took office. He has openly questioned the value of alliances like NATO. He is turning long-standing diplomatic relationships into transactional business deals. If Canada refuses to back down in a future trade negotiation, will the U.S. use the F-35 as leverage? Will they accidentally delay a software patch right when we need it most? No one can guarantee that won't happen in the volatile years ahead. And Canada isn't alone in this anxiety. In Germany, defense officials are starting to ask the same uncomfortable questions. Germany has historically been risk-averse, usually following the American lead. But if the economic engine of Europe decides that the risk of dependency is too high and looks for a plan B, the stigma of leaving the F-35 program evaporates. Canada would have the political cover to follow suit without standing alone. The F-35 isn't just a military procurement contract. It is a test of Canada's ability to act like an independent nation. If we continue to put all our eggs in Washington's basket while they are threatening to kick the basket over, that is a strategic failure. Ultimately, this story isn't about choosing an American plane or a Swedish plane. It is about defining what it means to be a sovereign country in the 21st century. Defense isn't just about having weapons stored in a warehouse. Defense is the ability to use those weapons when you need them, where you need them, without asking for permission. $19 billion is a high price to pay for borrowed security. Sovereignty is not something you can outsource. It is time for Ottawa to learn how to say no to these dangerous dependencies. Only then can we truly say yes to our own security and our own future. If you want to understand more about how major powers are using economics and tech to squeeze their allies, watch the video on your screen right now. It explains why Volkswagen and other major players are also trying to decouple from American instability. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis. Thanks for watching.